I've like gradually been evolving this theory in my mind over a period of time. And like, it seems like forward head posture is like a really popular topic with a lot of the singers that I've worked with. And like anytime we post about that, like we get a lot of likes. And I think that's because like just intrinsically singers recognize that like this is like a big deal. There's something here that like is significant, you know, and kind of as I've watched singers sing, like I've watched enough singers sing now to really see differences in like the way they project sound, you know, and like what they do with their arms and what they do with their chins when they're singing, you know, and I'm being like, you guys are all singers and I want you to call me out if I'm wrong because I'm not sure about this. But I have this kind of theory about this and like when we talk about I've thought a lot about like what are the real differences between like training a singer versus any other person to move well and like, you know, all of that stuff. And like one of the big things that we talk a lot about is like foot pressures and then the foot and projection and all of this. And like Marion, we talked about this today, you know, and it's kind of like with the foot we have kind of like your heel hits the ground, your midfoot comes to the ground, and then you project forward, you know. And with singers though, it's different than, and with athletes, like with somebody that's moving forward or sprinting, that's what happens. Your foot hits the ground, and it's like the name of the game is getting off the ground as quickly as you can or delaying it based upon what you need to do. But with singers, that's not true because your feet are always on the ground for the most part, unless you're jumping for some reason. But so more often it's that you've got a base of support from your lower body, and you have an upper body that travels through space and projects, you know. And so I kind of looked at that and I was thinking like, and this goes back to kind of a discussion that Philippe and I have been having like over a long period of time. It's like I've been trying to make sense of like, what does the gait cycle look like for the upper body, you know. And I've kind of like come to a conclusion about that, and I want to share that with you guys. So I'm going to and like as we go along, I want you guys to like stop, ask me questions, like, you know, and really pick this apart because like I said, a lot of this is just my thought process. I don't know if this is true or not, but I hope it is. So let me share my screen real quick. And this will be a presentation that I'm actually doing on Sunday. I want to share it with you guys. So what we're going to talk about is kind of like a framework of what this looks of physical training for singers. And what this looks like. Okay, it's going to be, you know, kind of my thoughts on, you know, what are the unique things about training for singers, and what is general, what is specific, you know, and then how do we, when you guys get back into concert season, like what are some more specific things that we can do in order to, you know, prepare for that. Okay, and then kind of look at the factors behind forward head posture, like all the factors, you know, and there are, you know, obviously below, but we also have things like the visual system and the tongue and like, you know, your jaw and things like that. So, and I've thought a lot about like, okay, what makes what is actually, you know, we call this musical athlete, like, what does it actually mean? You know what I mean? Like, how do we define that? Because you look at great athletes like Lionel Messi, obviously is an amazing athlete. The reason that is, it's not because he's super fast or super strong. It's because he's super variable. Like he can move in any direction that he needs to contort his body in order to you know, to fake out somebody or to shoot. And, you know, when you look at a guy, even like Michael Phelps, like it's similar, like he's really agile despite being huge, you know. And it's like, when I look at great athletes, that's what I see. It's not even necessarily like, to me, athleticism is the ability to change shape and to get into and out of positions and being able to, you know, basically access different options to do the same thing. You know, like this is why people get overuse injuries, is because they only have one pathway to project something or to get to where they need to go. Whereas if I have more pathways, I disperse the stress that it creates, and I have more options. And so I have more kind of roads to Rome, I guess you could say, you know. And like with like Isabel Leonard, who I do some training with, like she's really good at that. Like I've watched some videos of her singing, and I'm like, her upper body is very agile. She can move it very well, you know. And I think that makes a big difference. And so this is something that I'm not going to touch too much upon, but kind of the thing that doesn't do that is being sedentary. You know, it's like the problem is that, you know, we've had discussions before about like, we, you know, this, what are the differences between singers today versus like the singers of the past, you know, the golden era of singing, you know, and it's the level of it's what we do with our day, you know, it's the level of sedentary behavior. It's like we sit more, we're on our phones more, like we sit, we are stationary. Therefore, the way that we move appears to be more stationary. You know, you see people walking and it's like they don't rotate, they just kind of move side to side like a block because they can't access the relative motions of their hips and their shoulders anymore. You know, and over a lifetime, this type of thing does that to us, like sitting in a chair, sitting in a chair for 8 hours, driving long periods, you know, all of these things that we do. You know, like it's actually better to fidget for that reason, is because you're like you're maintaining, you know, those motions of your body. So I believe that that's a big one. You know, the other thing, and it's not just singers, it's every athlete. Okay. And I use runners as an example. And I don't know if anybody here is like an avid runner, but like runners are the most stubborn human beings on the planet because all they want to do is run. And I'll get runners in to see me that have like hip displacement and like labral tears and stuff that are caused by just doing one thing. Running is a straight ahead activity that occurs like that. You know what I mean? And like a runner that runs on the pavement, the same route all the time, will inevitably get injured because they're using the same stuff to do the same thing. And eventually their body just doesn't have it anymore, you know, and they're doing it for just a crazy amount of volume. And so that's why they tell runners like run on grass, you know, run hills, do different things, because it teaches your body to access different ways to do things. You know, and I believe that with singers, it's a similar thing. Like if all that you do is sing in a similar way and similar pieces, then you're using the same pathways to get there. And you literally get stuck in this forward head shape. You know, like when you look at this, like with the lower body, my biomechanics group talks a lot about in-game people that get stuck in their toes and get like a super back arch and are not able to get out of it. And these are the people that get like lower back pain all the time. They get stiffness in their hips and all this stuff. It's because they get stuck in extension. They can't let go of that. You know, the head, the upper body is the same way. You get stuck in this shape where you can't let go of this posterior compression. You can't open up. You're so far forward that your chest wall has to cave in and push you back. And so the only thing your body has to keep you forward now is pushing your head forward, you know, and you stay in that shape because it's all your body knows to do. You know, so for us, it's like, okay, I can look at all the factors why that happens, and I can give people exercises to reverse engineer it, you know, and we can use all these artificial inputs to get back to neutral, I guess you could say. But like, is the solution just moving more and doing different things? Like, you know, you can use this in a warm up, but the reality of it is you're going to go back to that if you don't give yourself variability. You know, if you don't do different things like moving, like, you know, the stuff that we do, Marin, like the different movements that we do, that's why, like, I can't keep doing the same things with you guys, or, you know, I would be negligent, you know, and so that's a lot of with my training. Like what I try to do is introduce variability into clients' programming because they don't get that in their life otherwise, just due to, you know, I mean, you know, life is busy, you know, so that's kind of the forebearer to all this, is that we're going to talk about the solution to forward head posture, but the secret to it really is getting movement, you know, a wide variety of movement, a diet of movement, I guess you could say. And it's kind of
Hey,
like,
Chris,
go ahead.
can I just mention something real quick? Because
Yeah, go ahead.
since you're presenting on this, you might find it useful to know that if you go to, especially to like a university,
Yeah,
but I think also with private teachers for learning how to sing classical music, you're going to go in and they're going to listen to you and they're going to hear the things that you already do well. And what they're going to tell you is that actually this is like a type, like you are this type. And a lot of times, like, and someone who does other things well, they will assign them a different type.
right.
And from the start, you're kind of channeled into this idea of only doing one set of things. And it's not like especially the men get like really put into tiny categories.
Yeah, I guess my question with that is like, is it always that way for children? Like, do children do they do that in the same way with like as a child, when you teach a child to sing, like do you give them a wide variety of things to perform in order to just get just see how you like it, or is it just straight into that?
Well, with children, you have to take into account their play, which is heavily vocal, and it's they're practicing vocalizing way beyond what most adults do just from play. So
Yeah, so
I mean,
right.
that when you're talking about like giving vocal lessons to children, particularly with like from a classical perspective, I think a lot of you have to be careful because the voice is still developing. So, I mean, certainly for me, I feel like the best way to approach it is just as Philippe was saying, like, bring in the idea of play, have them, sing stuff that they like, because then it's just about like teaching them how to breathe and teaching them how to like, fit what resonance feels
But
like.
I think Chris was talking about kids in general, right? Not with singing, right?
No, I actually am talking about singers.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Sorry.
I'm talking about kids in general, but I'm asking for singers because I don't know.
There's really not, there's not a huge, it's not like soccer or football, where there's like a big like infrastructure of kids being involved with the sport. With classical singing, that's kind of not, there's like,
I mean, there's children's choruses. Like, I think that's really where kids learn how to sing,
and there's these little competitions and stuff where they do
and Steph actually teaches kids. So, I mean, she would have more input on this, but what I like about what she does is like, I can see, like when I get in her car, I can see like all these like toys and stuff she uses to teach kids, and I'm like, that's good. But my point is that, and I can tell you, having grown up and played soccer from the age of like 4 years old, like when you play soccer as a kid, it's just soccer. Like they just want you to play soccer. And that's not good. Like when you're talking about training any human being, like early on, it's not about training. It's about like just giving them a wide variety of experiences so they can draw from those experiences as they get more specific, because it gives them more overall variability in general. And like when I work with a kid, like I work with soccer players that are like, adult, high school kids. I can always tell when they've just played soccer because they're very limited in terms of their ability to move. Whereas, most of the great athletes, like Roger Federer is a good example. Like he played multiple sports, he did, even Lionel Messi played multiple sports growing up. It wasn't just soccer, and
I can give you an example of that is that, I mean, I worked my contemporary singing up to the level where I could like do a public performance, and actually leave that out there for people to see. But it took like 5 guys who were really with strong personalities, like together, convincing me that the reason I wasn't singing contemporary music convincingly was not like something I am, but it was like something I was doing.
Yeah.
So because I was classically trained, like I refused to believe it could be, I was like, that's just my voice, like that was like so ingrained in the way I think.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I think there is a certain level, like there's, and it really depends on the teacher. I think I was lucky to have a teacher who really wanted me to just kind of like just learn various different things. And I mean, we stayed within classical music, but she gave me arias that were way beyond my age limit. Like, I was 16 and singing Samson and Delilah, but like, she just wanted me to learn the rap. Like she just wanted me to learn the music,
Sure.
And I think that, and I think that that's actually really beneficial. Like, as long as you're not expecting to sound like a 32-year-old, then why not learn the music? And then you can kind of get an idea of like what it takes to make these sounds. So I totally agree. And maybe you can kind of, widen it a little bit by saying like, you don't actually only have to learn classical style. You can learn Broadway or jazz or that kind of thing. And it's beneficial.
And I think beyond that, just generally too, it's like, I know for me with soccer, it's like, I need other things to develop a love for the game, you know, because if I just did that and I was so focused on that, like it's very rare the person that can just focus on one thing and they're happy. You know, you need other things. And that's just from a burnout and, you know, a mental health perspective as well. But my point is that I also believe that with adults, we need other things. You know, I mean, we need diverse interests in order to be healthy. We need diverse movement stuff in order to be healthy. Like that's why I would never, you know, just have somebody do one thing because it's boring and it like doesn't necessarily work. I mean, you know, there's training and then there's just labor. You know, I mean, like training should be something that's somewhat enjoyable. It should never be, you know, completely a task. So I guess that's my whole point with this is that just, you know, I mean, and you guys know all this anyway, but I mean, it's important to talk about, I think, because so many people get like people take this stuff too seriously, man. They really do. Like everything, like in my field too. So, you know, the same way. And I understand why, but you know, there's just a point where you just like it just you know gets beyond the point of competing interests, you know, and it's just you're just like, But that said, what makes a musical athlete? Okay, I believe it's three things. Like from a movement standpoint, okay, we have optimal breathing, okay, which we talked about a lot with you know the inhalation and exhalation. You know, a lot of the breathing drills that we do. We have a stable lower body, okay, which is finding the stacked position that we talked a lot about, the stacked posture. And then we have a dynamic upper body, which you can see like with Kirsten here, she's projecting, you know, she's like really, she's projecting. You can see that she's extending from her upper body, but her lower body's holding back a little bit. So as opposed to field sport athletes where extension is initiated from the bottom, for extension is initiated from the bottom and the upper body delays a little bit. With this type, with singers, it's the opposite. Extension is initiated from the top and then the lower body acts as a base. So you know, you can either create more extension or less extension. So you can imagine then if the whole thing is hyperextended already, you know, how much room are you going to have to be able to project from, you know, and that's the whole thing where we talk about pulling center of gravity back. But now, you know, what I'm thinking, kind of my theory with this is like, all right, so then can you control your projector? Okay, because we've got like you know, we have the pelvic floor down here and the stable base. And in reality, when we exhale, the pelvic floor is producing pressure to push air up. Okay, but then what happens is the upper body is going to project it forward. Okay, or project in any way that we attempt to. You know, so we have somebody here that's kind of projecting laterally. Okay, or we have somebody here that I would consider to be more mid-range. Or we have somebody here that's lifting their chin, and this is what I consider to be more toe off. Okay, so we relate that then to the three phases of gait. We have initial contact, we have mid stance, and we have takeoff. Okay, so this is how I'm thinking about starting to classify, you know, these different movements of the body into when we talk about dynamic upper body posture for singers. You know, we have sort of initial contact. This is the ability to, you know, inhale and receive air. We have mid stance, where I believe that sort of everybody sort of lives in this posture most, because you're sort of, this might be like legato or lower, you know, stuff. And then we have takeoff, which is like really projecting, hitting higher notes, like really pushing, I guess you could say, you know. And so when we talk, and please guys stop me if this is inaccurate in any way or you have thoughts, but so early stance then, like heel strike, in like the heel coming onto the ground for a singer would be the ability to get the chin to the chest. Okay, because when I'm doing this, what I'm doing is I'm filling my posterior lungs with air. Okay, this is the ability of my suboccipitals, my neck, as well as my upper back to let go of tension, okay, and receive air. Okay, so this is chest wall compression, upper back and lower cervical expansion, and posterior airway expansion, anterior compression in the front. Okay, so one side has to close, the other side has to open. Okay, we have mid stance, which is sort of like now I'm exhaling, I'm starting to push, I'm getting sternal expansion, my chest wall is starting to expand as I project out. Okay, my upper back is compressing from behind to push me. Okay, and I'm getting relative compression of my posterior airway as well as my upper back. So stuff is being pushed forward, but there's still some room. Like I'm not maximally squeezing yet. This is like sort of like you know, this is a mid-range thing.
Chris,
Okay, and then
can I stop you?
Sure, go ahead.
Because actually the previous slide,
Oh, go ahead.
When this is going on, do you expect the internal obliques to be quite spread out and wide?
So here's the thing, Philippe. Honestly, man, this never happens. Like, obviously, this is never going to really happen in singing, but this is the capacity for it to happen. To your, as far as, so you're asking me during inhalation, do I expect the internal obliques to spread out?
No, in early stance.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's very
Yes.
useful information. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, mid stance. So again, relative motion is still possible here, guys. And to kind of clarify, like, to me, relative motion is like stuff is still able to move independent of one another. Like when I really squeeze everything together, everything moves as a unit. Whereas here, I'm still able to get independent movement of things, and I still have a little bit better control here. Okay, and then we have toe off. Okay, and this is like where everything is squeezing from behind so much that everything is maximally closing on the back side and opening on the front side. So we have this, and this is where we start to get into these like postural compensations, like an excessive arch in the back in order to produce more force or to produce more compression to do something specific. And that's okay. Like, you know, somebody's inevitably going to do this, but when you see somebody like pulling their arms back and lifting their chin and stuff, like, this is why I believe is because they're using other stuff together to produce more oomph, I guess you could say. Okay, and so we're getting maximal expansion of the front and maximal compression of the back. Okay, and that's fine. I think that's natural. That's okay for that to happen. You know, you just have to get out of it as well. Okay, and then we've got like a weight shift. Okay, we've got a propelling side where her left side is sort of opening and pushing forward, and her right side is receiving. Okay, she's shifting everything to the right side, but she's propelling from the left side. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, can you kind of see how she's doing that? Right. So we got a relative opening of the front side on the left side. We've got a relative opening of the back side on the right side. Okay, and so then you look at forward head posture, right? And you look at somebody that has this sort of like sway back posture. Okay, here you can see that on the right. Okay, and this is somebody who's come so far forward that they have to compress their chest wall to push back so their head can push forward. I call this is like a balloon that's already been squeezed. Like, this is somebody that doesn't have the ability to project very well just because they're already there. You know, they're already pushing hard there. You know, and you could say that, well, wait, they've got a hump in their back. The only reason that is because that's all they have to do. You know, they still are compressed on the backside. They're still compressed up here too. It's just a different type of compression. This is a relative, and this is what I'm saying by an orientation. When we talk about an orientation, like, this is not somebody that can achieve regular motion of their bones and their joints. This is somebody whose body is contorting itself to get to where it needs to go. So, you know, if I'm trying to get inhales and exhales in certain areas with this person, I can't. You know, I've got to get the stack back in the middle before I can start to worry about the stuff about dynamic upper body posture, right? So before I start to work on any of this stuff that I'm talking about, I've got to get back to simpler things like learning to tuck and to reach and just to breathe and get my diaphragm to move up and down, because that reestablishes this base, you know, and then I can talk about some of this other stuff. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah?
Yeah.
So I want you to realize, like, when in doubt, go back to the stack, because the stack is the most important thing always. You know, that's the first thing. Okay. Then, okay, after we stack, and now we can start to talk about, you know, improving the dynamic capabilities of the upper body. So now, what are our forward head factors? Okay. We've got mouth breathing. Okay. We have an overactive visual system. Okay, you see people looking down to create stability. Okay, you see this, and I'll show you examples of that. Okay, now we start to get into an upper back and a chest wall that are compressed, and just an overreactive postural reaction. Okay, that's more to do with breathing. Okay, but you know, again, that's relevant, and I want to talk about it because there are some things that we could do to start to really rev that up even more. Okay, but when we talk about breathing, we've gone over this before, but you know, you can see in this picture on the right, it's almost like she has facial stacking versus this facial anterior tilt here on the right, where we have this tongue that doesn't push up against the teeth. And over time, it's going to create this, it's going to sit on the bottom of the mouth. It's going to start to sort of seep back into the airway, and it's going to lessen space there, and almost creates this forward facial tilt. Okay. That alone is creating a relative forward head posture. Okay. And these are things that we've gone over. Okay. But palatal tongue posture, the ability to push the tongue up against the roof of the mouth and breathe. Okay. And then also learning to swallow with the tongue at the roof of the mouth, and practicing this stuff regularly is really important. And it's kind of like we do with the breathing, you know, like the biomechanics, the stacking, the stuff that we put in our warm up. Like if this is a problem for somebody and they have this issue, putting some of these things in their warm up and just kind of reminding their body to do it is good, and maybe even precede some of the breathing because they need it. You know, I mean, their body is, you know, and I mean, things evolve over time, right? And so, you know, having them kind of assume that tongue posture and just do some breathing in a basic position is a very big deal. And then even having them, you know, swallow, you know, take take a couple sips of water, you know, in that same position as a warm up, like is I think a very important thing to do. And so again, these are things that you guys already know, but you know, these are particular things that we could do to get their tongue to sit at the roof of their mouth, you know, whether it be, you know, making in sounds, in, to get the tongue to kind of push up from, you know, behind, to get to the tongue to push up against the teeth, kind of clucking, to get the middle of the tongue, and then like ga sounds to kind of get that posterior tongue contact. You know, just kind of working on that stuff, workshopping where they don't have that control, you know, and then just knocking out some breathing with that. You know, I've been doing that with some clients that are non-singers in my gym, but I've done that with several clients who had, you know, like back pain, and it's helped. You know, I think just because they were like, you know, they weren't using their nose very well because they couldn't contact their tongue to the roof of their mouth. So they were just like, you know, they just couldn't take a breath very well. You know, but I think that that's really valuable. And I think that that's something that, you know, it's kind of like just assessing or self-assessing, you know, is that particular thing a problem? You know, if you see somebody with like a class 2 malocclusion that's got kind of this like retruded jaw to some degree, then that might be something that you look more at. But when we talk about vision, okay, this is something that we could get a little bit more into. And this is something that, does anybody ever get like headaches? Like you get like, you know, like just tension headaches. Does anybody ever have that? Is that a thing for anybody? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So this is your suboccipitals are probably the reason why. Okay, and your suboccipitals are the thing that control the movement of your eyes. Okay, these are your eye rudders. Okay, and so like when I look in one direction, like when I look to the right, my left suboccipitals have to squeeze and stabilize my right side to make sure that my head doesn't move with my eyes. Okay, and you see that in a lot of people. Like everybody do this for me real quick. Take your finger and go like that. Okay, now try to keep your head still. Look to the left and then look to the right. And then just do that a couple times. Okay, and see if you can just keep your head still while you do that. Okay, so like if I do that, for example, and let's say I go like this and my head rotates this way, my left suboccipital is not stabilizing my head, you know, and so I'm gonna start to get unwanted cervical movement there, and I'm gonna start to get overuse in that same area, and it's gonna start to squeeze more. So weaker muscles are gonna tighten because that's their like defense mechanism, you know, and that's a really important point. So like if I'm trying to create release in an area, like to my left suboccipital, I'm going to stabilize my head and look to the left because that's going to deactivate that and activate my right side. Just kind of like we talk about where one side is like yielding and one side is propelling. So that's a really big deal. And I think that when we talk about like vision stuff, it's pretty easy to incorporate this into stuff that we're doing, just like working with the tongue. So I talked about, and guys, please stop me if you have questions or comments.
Hey, Chris, I just could just mention really quick this bone unit that we're talking about. So there's a part that I'm pretty sure most people are referring to when they talk about the soft palate.
Yeah.
And that's the pterygopharyngeal part of the upper pharyngeal constrictor.
Okay.
And that's connected to the pterygoid.
Pterygoid process. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's these two hooks coming down
Yep.
off of there.
Yeah. The pterygoid process attaches to the sphenoid. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and those are called the hamuli or something.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
some kind of hamulus. These
It is
names
like
are so weird.
Hamulus. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reading. I was like Romulus. It's like a
Yeah.
Star Trek.
And so
Yeah.
that's directly controlling the vocal tract shaping to like just right connected to that bone. So
Yeah.
just to
Okay.
mention,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
that
so
orients you in the vocal tract.
yeah, absolutely, and they certainly have connections, and I guess that's why, like, I don't know if you guys noticed, like, maybe you could look more to the left or the right, but basically, like, your body can only move in where it perceives. You know what I mean? And your visual field dictates movement options in any particular direction. And when I can't look as far in a direction, the stuff in that direction is going to tighten and sort of like internally rotate because it's a safety mechanism. You know, that's why vision is really important. So like, and really the simple thing to do is like when I'm doing my breathing drills, you know, if I know that like I can't see as well to the left side, you know, like if I'm doing like if I'm doing like a 90-90 hip shift and I'm trying to shift to the left, I could just look in that direction as well at the same time. You know, I mean, that's the easy way to start to incorporate that stuff. But that's like such a big deal. You know, I mean, it's such an important thing to know and to practice. And it's like another layer. But even if you have a student that like is like, you know, it just seems off or whatever, their spatial equilibrium, like just having them, you know, like try to focus forward and look in a direction and seeing that, you know, I think is like, you know, I see like you learn these little things and I see them more and more, I guess maybe as confirmation bias, but
if you want to use me as a test subject, I have pretty major problems with it.
I will.
So yeah, and I have video proof for you, or you know something.
You would, Philippe. I like that. Yeah.
No, but it's like you know,
Yeah.
it's like you can do it perfectly. I can do it perfectly, right? And I step on stage and suddenly I can't do it.
Well, that's
The difference is I have to look somewhere on stage.
well, right, and so that's the other thing, and I'll talk about that in a second. But that's called adding load to your vision.
Okay.
And that's and so with that, that's like what I mean there is that I'll get into that in a second, but you can kind of see these examples of like somebody's deadlifting, so he looks down to create stability, you know, and then he follows it up with his eyes. You know, that's like literally adding load to your vision. That's literally adding load to your vision, right? And in a similar way, you know, like this old man is like can't fix his head up because all he has left to do. He's like so far oriented forward, as we talked about. The only thing that he has left is to look down in order to push himself away from the ground. So it's pretty striking when we really think about it. But like when we just talk about like making this more simple, looking down is internal rotation and extension. So it's like pushing back, and looking up is opening things up. So like if I'm trying to get somebody hip range of motion, you know, I'll tell them to look forward, like look a mile in front of you and look up slightly, you know, or if I'm trying to get somebody like to shift to one side and I'm trying to use my eyes to get there, I'm going to tell them to slightly look up and look to in that direction. Because that's just, you know, it opens up the visual field. I guess looking down and coming in closes the visual field. Looking up and out opens the visual field.
Chris, I have a question.
Sure.
And this might be like a little far-fetched and not necessarily related to this, but
Yeah.
I have like an excessive blinking problem that has become like evident on this like just like acting class, like on camera that I'm doing, that for some reason sometimes I like blink too much and it's obviously distracting. So I'm trying to work on that. And I'm wondering if it's just like a nervous thing, if it's something that I can work on separately. I don't know.
So when do you notice that you do it at certain times? Like, is that a thing all the time, or is it just when you're in that class?
Yeah, it's I don't think it really happens. I noticed it in, I think it's mostly when I'm acting, not necessarily when I'm singing. And yesterday I was in the class and then we look at our tapes, and yeah, I think it's like a little bit of a crutch. I don't know, when I'm like trying to like be expressive, and I
Yeah.
just like blink too much.
Is it is it like is that relatively like stressful for you?
Uh, I don't not, I wouldn't say it's stressful. I think it's maybe that I'm just like trying to communicate and like adding things,
At least it's
So
not whenever you're lying.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it might be something like when you say and that
Uh-huh.
like you can kind of,
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like some sort of crutch.
yeah, right.
Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head. It's like trying to like rub your tummy and like, sing a song at the same time. Like your body is your eyes are like anything else. Like obviously, like we're not going to lift weights with your eyes, but that's called adding load. You could, but that would be really awkward and last probably not long. But it's just so it's almost like you want to practice vision in different situations with different levels of complexity, and it's the same thing. It's like with movement, right? Like I wouldn't start somebody, deadlifting 300 pounds. You know what I mean? I'm going to start them with very simple stuff. So your vision is the same way. Like typically that does mean that you've got, your body's kind of like defaulting. Like it's almost like it's like a feedback loop that trips or something. You know what I mean? And so what I'd say is that some of these exercises will probably help you for that reason. And I'll send you some videos of like more specific things, but you can, what I would start with is like just starting with simple, like what are called smooth pursuits, where you're just following your eyes with your hands like that. And you can do them in all directions, and you want to make sure that you can do them in all directions before you start to do different things. But then you can start to move your head in the opposite direction as you do that, because like probably, Eugenia, what you're doing is like you're probably like when you're acting, your body's probably being like very expressive, right? Like you're doing things with your hands and you're it's a physical thing, right? So this is teaching your body to disassociate the movement of your eyes with the movement of your head.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is like when you add too much complexity to movement, your body is going to just like, I mean, it can get there, but it has to, you'll see that little trip, because it's having to like compensate to do it somehow. And that might be it,
or even with what I'm thinking, right? Because
Yeah.
what's coming out of my mouth doesn't necessarily have to be matched with my...
Right. Well, that's the thing, is that, I mean, really, when you think about it, like I talk about like the fitness stuff, but like your speech, your vision, your hearing, like all of those things are competing interests, and if you were to go to a concert and I were to blare rock music behind you and I'm like, all right, act, like it's going to be harder for you, because like there's just all this sensory information coming at you, like what the hell's going on, you know what I'm saying? It's so it's like that. So so it's like starting basic, right? And I would even do that. It would be fun to try that before acting classes, just like try to do some like visual, just try to do some different, movement based stuff here, and see how that goes. And so you have sort of those things which are called smooth pursuits. But then you also have what are called saccades, which are rapid eye movements, where it's almost like plyometrics for your eyes. You're working on just like fast, rapid movement. And that would also be, it's like, different tempo of stuff. And so you want to give yourself like a different, a variety of that stuff, and so.
Oh, Chris, we got to make like a board with conductors that pop up.
Yeah, there you go.
And you have to follow the conductor, and you're allowed to turn your head towards the conductor.
Yeah, you play some, play some like Flight of the Bumblebee, like.
Totally.
You have to keep it. You have
Can
to
you
follow the beat.
conductor?
I feel like this would be like actually a really, really good like video game if you could,
It would be really,
but like
really good.
if I knew how to code, that would be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh
That
my
probably would be like a really cool video game, actually. I think that
Like those indoor golfing things.
yeah, absolutely. But really,
The projector.
yeah, seriously, man. I mean, but really, I think that like those type of exercises like are really valuable, and I think that like, I mean, there's so much, like there's so much stuff, but I guess my biggest thing is like, because that's a specific thing for you, Eugenia, I think that might be of value to like some people, I mean, who knows what it is, but you know, as with anything else, right? Your eyes are a muscle, okay, and it is an area that you can improve, so you
Yeah.
might as well train it, and you might try to. It's like activation work for anywhere else, right? Like we engage the hamstrings until the pelvis, same thing, so you might do that before class and see how that looks.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. But when we're looking at, when we look at breathing compensations as well, like it's the same, man. I mean, we get into these shapes where, we're not able to kind of go through this whole cycle of motion, with our upper body, and it's going to limit, your potential as a singer. I really believe that. And I think that that's why this stuff is so important. That's why breathing is so important. People talk about the support mechanism. And the reality of the support mechanism is the diaphragm being able to produce pressure with the pelvic floor, and the upper body being able to project that in any way that you choose. But if we get into a situation where we're different in one place and there's too much tension in the system one place, not enough in another place, then we're not going to be able to do what we need to do nearly as well. And so that's why I believe that stuff's so important. And so obviously, when we inhale, we get this sort of relative backwards motion of air. And when we exhale, the opposite occurs. And so in order for that to happen, our joints have to be able to come into these shapes and be able to produce these movements, in opposition as well. Hold on 1 second. You know what? I do this every time I present, is that like I use old videos and like I narrate the freaking thing. But anyway, so when we talk about just some things that I want you guys to try on yourselves real quick, because I think that this is big, is, this gives you your potential for how much air you can actually take in. Okay. This is a test of your upper posterior lung. Okay. Like you can see, like if you look at my picture here, you can see the distance between my chin and my chest. Okay. So this means that my suboccipitals can relax and my neck can somewhat relax, but my upper back is crap. Like my upper back doesn't do that. Okay, everybody try that real quick. Can everybody get their chin to their chest? And I would bet that you guys probably can. Okay, because you guys are less stiff than me. Okay, is that right? Can you guys do that? Okay.
I can do it. It definitely feels like there's like some stretching going on, but.
So Marin, you and I are probably the ones that need a little bit of work in this particular area, and that's important to know, just because like for me, it gives me an idea of what I need to do. So in this
for the record, I worked on this today, so
for sure. Well,
it's not a great test.
The skill here, and I want everybody to try this real quick, is just slouching. Okay, so what this looks like, and we've gone over this some, but really we're just letting all the tension out of the system. So what I want everybody to do is just open your hands up like this. I want you to let your head drop. I want you to just let your upper back drop. Let all the tension out of your lower back as well. Just open your hands up and just take 2 deep breaths in. Okay, think about air going into these places. Kind of, we're closing the front and opening the back. So take a deep breath in. And exhale. And one more time, deep breath in. And exhale. right. And now, Marin, try this for me. Try to bring your chin to your chest and see if that feels any looser now. Like just real quick. I just heard something pop in that area.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
might,
it definitely feels a lot easier for sure.
that might be, so yeah, and so that's the key skill is that, just, you can do that literally in any position. I mean, you could do that in standing, you could do it in sitting, anytime you feel tension in your lower back as well. The reason that is because we're sitting too upright. We're creating too much extension and tension there. So literally slouching like that for like 60 seconds is a great thing to do. And it's something that I think that is actually really actionable because you can bend your knees, you can stack your lower body, slouch your upper body, or slouch everything, and just start to release some of that tension that was created during the day. So this is something that I think is super, super easy to do, and, just like that. So,
Chris, can I just mention something about this? Because
Sure.
since you posted about it on Instagram, I've been working on it because and today before I worked on it, mine was pretty tight too.
yeah,
And I noticed, so we recorded yesterday, and it was great to do it. It was a little tight to begin with, but what I didn't know about was that some of the tension was like I was using it, and I needed not just the relaxation, but then also some tension,
Yeah.
especially during my inhales. And I was winding up going head forward in my inhales because it was kind of like just too relaxed. So just a warning, like be ready to just remember.
Oh,
just-
absolutely. Well, what you can, and kind of to that point too, what you can start to do is also, do something like this where you breathe in and then just start to arch your back
Okay.
and exhale to bring tension back in.
And is that the same thing that holds you together when you get to the bottom of a push-up?
the tension you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so.
It keeps your shoulder girdle kind of like on straight.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing is that there's always a balance between tension and compression. And like, you look at people that are like super lax and can touch their hands to the ground, which I am not one of those people. They have a lack of tension in their system generally. Whereas you have people like me that are like overly stiff. I have too much tension in my system. So, it's kind of like, and that's the gold standard, is sort of learning to let go of tension, but to also create it. I mean,
that's on me. That's my planning. Like I should have had a plan in place to do to take care of my over looseness.
Well,
not so much that
Philippe, you usually do have a plan. So
yeah,
I mean,
this wasn't a good one. I guess.
To your credit, it doesn't always work, but mine don't usually work either. So
Anyway, sorry to. Okay.
No, you're good. You're good. But anyway, guys, as you can see, like these are the muscles that I'm talking about on the backside of your neck. And again, it's just letting these things go. It's just teaching these things to let go of tension, and kind of relax. But as you say too, kind of to Philippe's point, like it's also really important that, we do get these muscles to push because they are, projectors as well, and we need them. It's just we don't need them on all the time. That's all that I'm saying. And then
sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
It's interesting because I think in general, when you're talking about that sedentary lifestyle, like we're all in front of our computers. I think generally we tend to sit with our heads forward as we're looking, and then like our shoulders hunched a little bit. So like we're spending a lot of our time, not even singing, but just if we're in front of our computers in this position.
That's right. And on our phones, and and with whatever you're looking at. I mean,
if you're looking at your phone, you're usually looking down like that. Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem. And really, like, this topic is something that is artificial. I mean, this is something that we as a society have created for ourselves. Like, think about how little we actually look at the horizon versus down slightly. Like like we follow our eyes. That's why the vision thing is really important. So like in general as well, looking up more and looking forward more, like that's probably the number one thing in people that I see when I'm training them, more so in the last maybe 5 years too, is just they naturally look down. They don't look forward when they're doing an exercise. I always have to cue people, look up, look forward, eyes forward, and before, I've been training so long that it was before iPhones, and before the iPhone, that I don't ever remember doing that.
Chris, I can mention like this, I have this setup now, was not that expensive.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you now, I'm standing on a balance board because my
Yeah.
desk just elevates to however high I want it. It's in front of a window. So if I'm like thinking about mulling something over, I'm going to
Yeah.
tend to look out the window where it's nicer to look.
Yeah.
And I can crack it. It's blackout curtain, so I can crack it open just enough that I can see out, but the glare doesn't bother me.
Uh-huh.
And then I got a drawer that I built that slides out from under here.
Oh, that's cool.
So my piano's down here, and I can put a score up, stand on a balance board, and learn music. So it's like that whole sitting thing is no more.
Man, that's like back in the day. It's like redneck builds a chair or like a recliner with like a toilet and like a beer holder,
Yes.
like a beer dispenser or whatever.
It's got it's gonna have a cup holder.
Like, never have to move again. Like that's like
a convertible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
going,
like
we don't need chairs.
That's a Mr. Opera special right there. That's perfect. You got like the Mr. Opera station. You should patent that. That's right. You too can be Mr. Opera. All right, but when we talk about cervical extension, this is another one that like I am also limited here, so it's humbling. But this is where, so for a lot of my narrows, like a lot of my wides are going to have trouble going chin to chest. A lot of my narrows are going to have trouble doing this a little bit more, because this is just like we talk about rectus dominance and narrows, and this is the thing that pushes the chest wall back. The other thing that we get into is like scalene dominance, where the scalenes are like the rectus in that they're flexors. So they're going to pull down their accessory muscles of breathing, but they're also flexors. And so in order to actually, no, the scalenes are extensors. What am I saying? But when they're tight, they'll pull you under the same way as the rectus will, and they'll pull up in order to get air into the chest wall. And so what I want everybody to do is, like, when we do this, we look for two things. Okay, almost like, can the back of my head touch my shoulders here, but also does my ear travel back in space? Like, it shouldn't just stay in the same place. It should go backwards. Okay, so like if you're not doing that, your SCMs and your scalenes might be holding you forward. So everybody give that a go real quick. Like, just try to do that. Just try to feel that there and see if you can bring your, and I feel a stretch in my neck, but I can do that one. Does anybody notice that they can't do that? Does anybody notice restriction in that area?
Yeah, I think my ears might be going actually forward.
Okay. Well, so this is, and this is one of those that, we start to get into, people with forward head posture have a hard time extending from their axis, which is up here, like behind their head, so their suboccipitals produce extension, and we get into a situation where we have to push the head way forward in order to extend up. Okay, so this is where we want to start to work on extension from this area first. Okay, and so I'll show you guys a drill. I'm going to demo a drill here. Let me de-share my screen real quick. And this can also be done on the grounds. Okay, but like when I'm in this position, like what I want to be able to do, okay, is kind of like nod my head up without my head also translating forward. Okay, so I can use my elbows as a counterbalance. Okay, and what I can do is just work on inhaling on my way up, because it's going to get some expansion here. And then just exhaling and looking at the horizon again. okay, to sort of reestablish some of that. What I can also do is I can lie on my back, I can put a towel behind my neck, okay, and I can start to kind of like in a 90-90 position, I could do the same thing, you know, and so that's something, or I could just literally put my fingers behind my head here, get a tuck at the bottom. And just work on using my fingers to kind of create a fulcrum here to move from. So just kind of like go ahead, Mary.
I've done something like that with a foam roller behind and on, you know, on my neck. So yeah.
So yeah, similar. I mean, anything that acts as to anything that sort of gives you that lordotic shape of your neck and allows you to kind of move from the right place is good. But that's really important. A lot of people cannot do that. Like, I think that's a very, very common thing that singers struggle with. So that's thing one. Thing two, kind of just moving down, would be like manubrium expansion. Okay, so this area around the clavicles, okay, is something that, you know, oftentimes gets stuck down. Okay, and so the fix there, okay, would be to create extension with your arms. Okay, so this is triceps. Okay, so everybody do this a couple times. Like, just do some tricep extensions with your arms. Okay, like just try to feel your triceps. Like, do that. Okay, so we're just going like that. Okay, then from there, I want you to just sort of do a tricep extension, get your shoulders back a little bit. You're going to breathe in, squeeze your shoulder blades together, extend your triceps, try to feel all that. Breathe in, look up. And then exhale and just look forward. Just let everything relax a little bit. Breathe in and look up. Exhale and look forward. So that's going to give you a little bit more manubrium expansion. Okay, and so that's, you know, manubrium is here. It's kind of up in this area. If you think of your arms as aimers, they kind of go like that, you know, so it kind of aims air up there, you know, if we're thinking about that. You know, the last one would be just like a neutral reach. So, you know, this is for the sternal body. So this is a little lower. And this is for the people that are like that. Okay. And which, you know, again, we see that a lot. Typically, I'll do this first, though, because this helps to get the scaps in a little bit better position to hit this reach. But with the reach, similar, I'm going to get my tuck. Okay. I'm going to go like this. What I don't want to do is do a crunch. Okay, I want my sternum as well as my eyes to continue to face the horizon. So in this position, I'm just reaching with my arms. Okay, I'm going to give it a deep breath in. And then on the exhale, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a reach with my shoulder blades without like my back changing position. Like I shouldn't go into like a turtle shell. So one more time. And then obviously, if we have one chest wall that is like kind of stuck down, we could do the reach on one side or the other in order to get a little bit of kind of like inflation there, I guess you could say. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions on that, or did that?
How would you test for one wall being just by feel or by look? You just see the shoulder wall?
I look at this, like, so if I can't get my arm here, like, typically, if I have like restriction down here, you're going to need more manubrium expansion. Whereas if I can get to here, but maybe not here, then it's probably going to be a little bit more like of a chest wall thing. So the lower it is, the more I'm going to need like triceps first. And then the higher it is, but still some restriction, I can reach higher. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. Awesome. So that is, and I just have one more thing here, and then we start to get into, and as you can see, you know, we have our muscles of cervical extension, which are, you know, we have our pecs, we have our, and we have the musculature on the front. The major players, and what I'm talking about though for this are the SCMs and the scalenes in the neck, and then the pec major, the pec minor in the chest. But when we talk about cervical rotation as well, Okay, this is the thing that oftentimes is going to be very highly influenced by the suboccipitals, as well as the the stuff on the back. So the semispinalis, the longissimus, the serratus posterior, like all of the big muscles in the back that we say are compressing, typically are going to be in this sort of same category. So the move here would be, hold on, let me de-share my screen here. The move here would be to work on, we're going to bring in a couple things here, okay? Number one, we're going to get slouchy. So I'm just going to relax this side a little bit, but if I reach across my body like this, I can get a stretch of that area and I can get an opening of that area. What I can also do is look towards that area and put my eyes towards that area, because that's going to give me, it's going to move the vertebral bodies out of the way. So I can do this. And I can breathe in. Just to kind of open one side versus the other. And so if I test my rotation there, I can feel significantly more. And I like that because it is combining a lot of different things. Like it gives me, it's combining, upper back release. It's giving me, release on one side. And so if I have somebody, like if my chin to chest is compressed, probably the best bang for your buck thing you can do is just focus on one side and then the other, and then the other, and then the other, because that one side closes, other side opens. One side closes, other side opens. So sometimes it's easier to get expansion that way versus just like working on, one side, working on like one area. You kind of chop it in half and then you get more everywhere. So kind of conclusions to all of this is that stuff we've talked about before, but breathing with palatal tongue posture when not speaking. I mean, I think that's a big bang for your buck thing that you can do right off the bat. And then also practicing swallowing with palatal tongue posture, practicing visual movements while keeping your head still and moving your eyes in opposition. And then using triceps and reaching to expand the chest while slouching to expand the upper back. And really the purpose of this presentation is just to kind of give you some tools to recognize what forward head posture is, as well as like what to specifically do about it, right? Like, because it's not all the same. Like you can't just do chin tucks and fix forward head posture. That's not going to work. Like you have to clearly, you have to really kind of figure out like, where am I limited? Like what thing is not there? Like objectively, how do I look at it? And hopefully the cervical extension flexion test, as well as the rotation, like gives you a little bit more information about your body, and then you can start to incorporate some of the tongue and the vision stuff that we talked about, in order to sort of add to the equation in that way. But that's my, that's the presentation. Hopefully, that made sense to everybody, and it resonated with you. My upper body singing model thing was just something that I'm still playing with, but in my mind it makes sense. But I'd love your opinions on that thing, guys, or if you have questions, throw them at me. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I have a question. I hadn't checked in a little bit because I think it started getting much better lately. But when for a while, up until recently, when I was singing, I would notice that, like, I don't know which one it is, but one of these like would just like,
yeah, your sternocleidomastoid, yeah.
Yeah. And like, when I was singing, and now I feel like it's much better because I'm like able to dissociate. I mean, all of this is much better in general for me. So I feel like that's gotten like, but it was like crazy, it's like no matter what I did, it's like you could see my vibrato here, right?
Yeah. And it's I'm working with a singer now that like anytime she even speaks, like you could see all of this stuff like activate. Like you can kind of see it in me, but like everything, like all her neck muscles, you know. And it's just because she's a very tall, narrow singer, and she has a collapsed chest wall. And for you, like a lot of the things that we did do, Eugenia, was like we gave you more expansion here and more expansion here. And so as a result, like these muscles don't have to work as hard to lift your ribs up anymore when you breathe. You know, that's why, you know, like the SCMs are extensors as well. So like they will pull your head forward, you know, if they're on, you know, like that. So yeah, typically the solution isn't even stretching them. It's just like, you know, getting all the stuff below it to work. So these don't have to work as hard. So I don't know if that was your comment. Did you?
I can mention some anatomy about those muscles if you want, that might be helpful.
Sure.
Is that these SCMs are attached to the outside of the manubrium.
Mhm.
And if you go to the other side of the manubrium, inside the chest wall, or I guess it's not the chest wall yet, well, whatever, inside the manubrium, is one set of muscles going up to your hyoid bone in the front, and the other one goes to your thyroid cartilage, and then that energy is transferred through special muscles to the back of your hyoid bone.
Yeah.
So like everything that's going on here with your hyoid bone, basically, which decides how high or low your larynx is happening right on the other side of where these SCMs are connected. And then they're winding up connecting just behind your jaw. So it's like, what isn't showing up in the SCMs?
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
Right.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I mean, that's a really big deal. And that's why I think that, you know, like I said, and I didn't even talk about hyoid, but they are so connected, you know, and I think, you know, you guys would know better than me what's going on sort of on the inside of the airway, but I just think that, you know, the connection there is so big. And yeah, I would say that that's a really positive sign though, Eugenia, is that like you don't see them as much, I guess you could say. You know, that right there. And that actually confirms kind of some things that I've been thinking about as well. So
Yeah, one of the things that I've always been taught is like if you're looking at somebody who's singing and like their neck is like completely red and there's a lot of tension here, like that's not good. That means
Right,
that
yeah.
you know, it's doing all the heavy lifting right here,
Right.
and like other parts are not doing anything. But it also seems like it has to do with whether or not you're a narrow, you know, like whether like if you're seeing
Yeah, I
something,
think
you
it
know.
depends, because for me it was
and your
mostly
skin.
like it wasn't like I never felt like I was like, you know, like tightening my voice, or it was more of a tension in certain places because I wasn't strong enough in other places, right? So it's a little bit what Chris was saying, like my neck was trying to like just lift, like support everything, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
your neck was trying to lift your ribs because you weren't up handling your sternum like we would want you to or whatever, or your butt. Yeah, so that's common, you know, and that's kind of like it's the same thing. Like the body just repeats itself. So like this happens, then this muscle gets tight. Okay, this happens and this happens. You know, like they both rip. You know, and they go like that. So, you know, this releases, and that's the whole thing. It literally is like posture is a domino effect. You know, I mean, you change one thing, you see a bunch of other things change. And that's why like posture is constantly changing. You know, that there is no real good and bad posture. It's just you don't want to get stuck in any particular place. You know, and I think that's, were you guys going to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking like, you know, you're the analog that you had created from like a runner stance versus singers.
Yeah.
I still am not quite there yet. Like I see the mid stance as like, you know, the place where you normally are and everything like that. But that like, just because when we are naturally breathing, you know, inhaling and then singing, like that activity doesn't have the head posture that you had put on there, you know.
Right.
I wonder if there's a better way to showcase like what's going on, or like make that analog, or just so that so that I can think, okay, the different parts of me singing is I inhale, I, focus on a note, I sing that note, and I'm exhaling, and then it starts over again.
And yeah, in my mind, and the reason I'm with you there. In my mind, the reason that I put that is because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think most singers are taught to kind of keep their chin sort of like on the horizon when they're singing, right? Like that's a
Yeah,
thing,
just-
isn't it?
Mhm,
Yeah.
sort
So
of like straight, yeah.
so this obviously never occurs in singing, right? But it's an exaggeration. That's the point, is that what I'm trying to illustrate there is like, do you have the capacity to get this? Like that's maximal capacity. That's
Chris,
like, go ahead.
I mean, I can chime in about this. Like in the theater, I need to be able to not have like, so the kind of like most comfortable, optimal position for me is, unfortunately, turns my face down away from the lights. And that's a disaster as far as the director is concerned. And I mean, okay, I guess if you're so good that I'm not that good, that I can just ignore the director. So I have to turn my face up. And then they also want, a lot of expressiveness with the head. So I mean, just personally, I definitely am using like toe off. I think of it as toe off, and I'm using it in early stance, and basically the whole gait cycle. It looks like it has a use for me on the stage. So anyway.
Well, the other thing to consider with that, when you talk about training generally, it's like, okay, here's I'll throw something out at you, Merritt. It's like, okay, for somebody that never is going to sprint or like do, like high level sports, right? Why would we have them do like a split squat, for example? Like why? And like for me, my answer is that we want to give them the capacity to do something beyond anything that they will ever need to do.
Got it.
That's the way that I see that, is because like if somebody could get their chin to their chest, like I know that they have the maximal ability to get air in. Okay.
Mhm.
And if somebody can go like that, I know that they have the maximal ability to create compression back there. And I was thinking about when we talk about training upper body for a singer, right? Like, what are we really doing? So we talk about like pushing in order to push, but for a singer, it isn't that. Like in reality, pulling is actually pushing for a singer, right? And so, like from a like a training standpoint, that tells me that I want to focus on, like for a singer, like rowing and like chin ups and like things like that are important because they build the capacity of the body to create tension and let go of tension. Like that's something that I've been thinking a lot about too. And not because you're ever going to need to go there, with that amount of force, but because you keep it in reserve, I guess that's the whole thing. So I kind of look at it as almost like bulletproofing the capacities of your body, and so that's where I'm coming from with that. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. Like that to me feels like, okay, well, that's a range of motion, and like that, and to go like to, the extremes, to be able to have the full range of motion, that's good.
Yeah.
I guess for me, it's just a cognitive disconnect between I know that when I walk, I go through all of those phases, but
Sure.
when I sing, I don't go through all those phases. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can put some. It's possible that if I watch tenors, especially tenors who sing the way that I like,
Mhm.
and I watch sopranos who sing the way that I like, they're just not doing the same things at all. Their movements are completely different.
Right.
And it seems to me like the experience you're talking about is like what I see in those. It's more like what I see in those sopranos. And then the experience I'm thinking about is like, well, this is like what I'm expressing on stage is almost like violent. A lot of times it is literally violent on the stage a lot, like the kind of things I'm trying to express. And I think that makes, I mean, like what actually gets applied is I think gonna come down to that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my whole thing is like, okay, it's like a much less exaggerated version of that. So like just dropping the chin a little bit, raising the chin a little bit, you know, I mean, it
Yeah.
go beyond that, obviously, but like, I'm just, for me as a non-singer, like, you know, because like I did a workshop with a vocal coach, a couple weeks ago, and they're like, watch a singer sing. I was like, oh, but I was looking at it, and in my mind, I was like, okay, what do I understand? I was like, I'm watching them do certain things and their chin would drop a little bit and do certain things and their chin would raise a little bit. I'm like, oh, the gait cycle, so that's where I got this idea. It like, and I view things like, because I am not that good yet at that, these extremes give me confirmation, I guess, of what I think that I see. So that's where I'm coming from, as far as just capacities go. But
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying, and I think that you're right. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, and even with like assessment of gait, I'm still also looking at like indirectly, I'm looking at like hip ranges of motion, and I'm looking at, can this person touch their toes? Like if they can't, then probably they can't access heel strike like that, more so than I'm actually like watching them walk, because like I just don't, I don't have that like eye for that yet. You know what I'm saying? So like, I think like people watch videos of people running and they're like, oh yeah, look, he can't get a heel strike. I'm like, oof, I can't see a thing, so.
Does it make sense to say that, so if I take an inhale, that if I'm staying, if I want to be kind of like maximum potential, that I'll actually start off more in having a lot of features of early stance, and
Yes.
then wind up almost like the breath itself almost pushes me into toe off department.
Another
That makes sense to me. Like that would right there to be like to put it with the breath. And I'm just giving you this feedback because if you are going to be using this presentation for other singers, like this is how a singer
Yeah.
thinks, so
into the breathing cycle is what you're saying.
Yeah. And for me, after that happens, I have a choice to make at the beginning of the phrase. Am I going to go with this toe off thing? Because I have another thing I do that's totally going into early stance, and it's like a gorilla singing, and these are two different things. I don't mix them.
Yeah,
if I do mix them, I get into trouble.
Right. Okay, so this does make sense because it's like, because I know what where I am in my breathing cycle. I know how much I have left before I have to take another breath. I know how much I need to breathe in order to sustain the next phrase, like all of that kind of stuff. So that way I can, like, my range of motion, is, I mean, all of this is like going on in the back of my head, like it's automated, but if I can tie that to the range of motion this way, that's helpful, because then I can also say, oh, well, maybe this will actually help make that phrase longer, or whatever. So
that's really good feedback. And yeah, it's that makes total sense. Like that actually makes way more sense. I mean, I could relate it to both, just depending on who I'm talking to, but yeah, no, for what, yeah. And it literally is the same thing. Like breathing is the gait cycle. Breathing is what I'm talking about. It's the movement of the diaphragm, the loading of the diaphragm, inhalation, and then exhalation is propulsion. That is the same, like literally. So yeah, perfect.
And if I had to, like from experience, I do this wrong sometimes and right sometimes, right? And when I've been doing it wrong and I start to do it right, it feels like it actually is something. But if I've been doing it right for a while, this going from early stance to, going through this cycle doesn't feel like anything at all. It just doesn't.
Yeah,
there's nothing there.
Yeah, no, I get it. And like I said, I mean, we use analogies to make this stuff easier to understand for people. And I think but hopefully this came through and you guys you get what I'm saying, and there's like some value to that, like I'm just trying to find ways to like categorize, what we're doing and making it simple so we can because if I can place something into a category, then I can create things to enhance, I can assess each area, and I can create steps to improve an area where I, analytically, I could say, this is weaker, this is stronger, I need to focus a little bit more over here, so that's, I guess that's where I'm coming from. And that's why in my mind, like, I want to take this from just like, oh, it's working out, to like, it's actually training for support what we're doing, that's my, that's my goal with this, because that's the way I see it. Really, it's like yes, we're working out, but we're doing it specifically, we're doing it to get in better shape and feel good and everything else, but we're also doing it to get this, this is the reason why, so hopefully that came through,
Everything you've explained brought to mind specific practical skills that are possible points of failure when I do a show. So,
Good. That's my goal. That's my goal.
Yeah.
That's it. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for me. Did anybody have any other questions or anything else?
No, I just want to, because this might be like a much bigger topic, but something that has started to be on my mind is like Alexander technique, and how what we do like relates to that or not, or it actually is making me think how, because I think Alexander technique has a lot of good things, but with what we're doing now, I'm starting to realize that it's actually like kind of superficial and limited, probably.
Well,
Great way to get self-conscious.
I don't honestly, I don't know enough about Alexander technique to comment on it intelligently. So I will definitely pick your brain on that, because I do want to know way more about it. It seems like from what I have read and I've learned about it so far, like it's very kind of shrouded in like you need to work with a practitioner to be taught it. Like it doesn't, like there's no, I bought a couple manuals on it and I've read them, and it doesn't actually like say like, here are specifics about,
It's very holistic. My experience of it is like really talking about like the whole holistic system, and posture is a big part of it, a huge part of it.
Right.
But Alexander technique and Feldenkrais are like very similar.
Okay.
I can put you in touch with a practitioner of each if you want, Chris.
Yeah,
Why I personally, and I'm not trying to like bring down Alexander technique, it's just like between us because we're doing this work. I haven't worked extensively in Alexander technique, but I did some of it. And my impression was that it's very much like kind of like these exercises to like release tension and learn how to like dissociate and like release tension in specific parts. But I remember like vividly the last time I had an encounter with Alexander technique, and it was like, granted, it was like in a group session in a summer program, it was something quick, but it was about this, right? And she was addressing like the tension that I have here, but it was very much kind of like what we talk with which is what I was dealing before starting to working with you, Chris, with my voice teacher, that they were pointing out something, and basically the solution was just like fix it magically, right? Like don't do that, right? Think about not doing that. Right, release, like this is your
don't
problem.
forget to release.
Think about not doing that, and the only way it's gonna get better is if you like create awareness around it and like focus on not doing that.
I was so good at it, I released my releasing. But then...
Right, and like now that we're like going in such detail, and like for example this very specific thing, like right, like all of this tension that I had here that is automatically getting better without me even having like necessarily thought about it, because we're developing all of this strength that I didn't have because of my body type, so that's where I like just start thinking about these things where I'm like, it's not that it's bad, or I think it is helpful, but with the work that we're doing, I just realized like that it's still kind of very superficial in a sense, because you're not addressing like the muscle weaknesses that a certain body type might have and why that is happening.
I had
Yeah,
10 years of
It's not
private
just in your
lessons.
head, you know.
Here's what I'd say about that. And I think that I've done Feldenkrais and I really like it because I think that it builds bodily awareness and that's always a positive thing. I just think that the difference as far as what we're doing, and this has been a big revelation to me with my own clients, like in my own gym, it's like, in order for somebody to really do something, like they have to understand why they're doing it. You know, like that's really what it comes down to. Like if there's something going on, you can focus on it, but you're like why though? Like what exactly? You're like I know that this is here and I'm trying to relax it, but I don't exactly understand why it's there or what's happening. So
It seems like great training for magicians, you know,
well,
like
it's but the
they'll
thing
flex this and you look at it and then they like move the thing so you
the reality is that what we're learning is biomechanics of the human body. Like that's what this is. That's the way that I'm teaching this. You know, we're learning mechanics that occur in real space time that are actually true that occur in the human body. Okay.
Yeah.
When you understand the mechanics of what are happening, then Alexander technique, as does everything else, becomes a tool that you can use to address those things. You know, and I think that is very valid. I mean, I think that there's definitely a place for it. Feldenkrais as well. I think they're great, you know, because they bring mindfulness to an area. I think that's fantastic.
It definitely helps with focus, you know, and bringing you into the room and the task at hand. And I think it has a lot of valuable things, but that was kind of, it just brought me back to that moment where I was like, well, yeah, it's not just about creating awareness around attention.
Yeah, I did 10 years of that, private lessons.
Of Alexander's
And-
technique. Yeah.
Alexander technique. And my review of it is, you have to know going in, it's based on this idea that if you took away all of your bad habits, suddenly the perfect movement would spring out of nowhere. And the thing is that we know that, like, if you're going to go with science, we know from science that that's not the case. That, like, even the way you walk, that's a learned behavior. It's not really like, it's not epigenetics or something like that. And it's like singing and everything, like the way you sing is not like, you didn't sing that way as a baby.
Yeah.
You didn't have a hyoid bone as a baby. You didn't even have the same you didn't have the same organs, and you definitely were not making the sounds that we're after.
Right.
You know, so I mean, and so that idea, if you don't agree with the idea that just taking away your bad habits and inhibiting things is going to suddenly release the beast that does everything the way you want, then don't do Alexander technique, because that's the theory you're working with. I mean,
well, again, you know, this stuff is just like, it's just the mechanics of what occurs. You know, I'm not coming at it with a slant of any kind. Like, I'm not saying like, here's a Chris Kelly method of whatever. It's not. I'm not that guy. It's not Body by Chris or whatever. It's just, these are the biomechanics of the human body. You know, like, here's what it is in relation to.
Yeah, it's like when I relax this, my head doesn't float up magically.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that and my whole thing is too, like, from my perspective, like, I'm not a singer, and I think that coming into this, you know, it's like, I think a lot of like vocal pedagogues and teachers probably, with a guy like me, they'd be like, well, what do I know about singing? You know, and my answer would be initially nothing. But what I do know is the mechanics of the human body, the biomechanics of breathing. Like, that is human. You know, I mean, that is relation to humans. You know, and so if we can improve that, then, you know, everything else as a result will get better, because that relates. It's not specific to singing, but it's absolutely specific to singing. You know what I mean? As it is to every other thing that we do. It's the thing that we do most.
Anything,
you know, so,
that's specific to the body is specific to singing.
Yeah.
Yes.
People need to understand.
Exactly.
So I just, you know, I see it that way, but that's my whole thing, is like, you guys know so much more about your bodies now just because you've taken the time to study it. and as a result, you can use whatever tool that you want to get a result. I mean, I have certain drills that I use and stuff like that, but like once you know this stuff, then you can manipulate whatever you want to get a result. And that's all that I want you to do. Like, use my stuff, use somebody else's stuff, use Alexander technique. It doesn't matter to me. I just want you to be healthy and like practice some of this stuff, and I mean, as long as you do that, like, I'm good, like, it's fine, so I really want to learn more about Alexander technique. And I think that there's probably a lot of similarities in a lot of the things that, we're putting forth, and the work is just learning. We're just learning about this stuff. We're learning about the body. And then, each of you makes different decisions based upon what's best for you, and so your own personal routine is all that I want you to have, and once you have that, then, I've done my job, or and all I can do as like a teacher or like a trainer is like continue to present you with different options and strategies and like information. And then, you could say, hey, that's useful for me, or that might not be, but that's what this whole thing is. Like, I try to not get caught up too much in the technical aspect of it, despite, teaching technical stuff, is because like, I mean, there's so many things out there. It's ridiculous. It's just what resonates with you and what you like and whatever. So that's where I'm at with it right now. But I do want to learn more about it, and definitely put me in touch with that person, Maren, because like,
Yeah.
I want to try everything that I possibly can,
Yeah, I think it's important to just have it around, just because it is such a thing in the singing world, that I think it's interesting to see, like, how it connects, how it's useful or not, or.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's room for all of these things. I just hope that, the overarching principles of what we're trying to talk about, just proper train, like, what does holistic training look like for a singer, like overall, like that's what I want to put forth for this world, and people can choose to listen or not, but if my message is just teaching about breathing and it's the truth, it's just what happens, then nobody could really disagree with me. They could say like, oh, this guy's full of shit because I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I just want to be.
I just think like mentally too, like what we're doing is just so much more freeing, because it's tangible solutions that are factual. And what I don't love about this, idea of like, oh, you have the power to tell your body to not have tension,
Right.
is that if you can't do that, then what? It's your fault and you're fucked up in the head. That's what ends up like happening to a
Then
lot
it
of
turns-
speakers.
But
You
you
know,
Yeah.
do have the
oh,
power
it's on
by
me.
getting stronger.
It's
Yeah.
my mental,
Mhm.
it's like my mental power, and I'm not able to like tell my body to not have tension, when in reality, it's literally a physical thing that's
More-
underdeveloped that can't be fixed.
That's the other major criticism, I think, is that you're set up from the first day to be the one who's responsible if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And which you can be, because now
Right.
we are responsible of the training that we're doing.
Right.
But we're
We either do
doing
the
it-
exercises or not, so yeah.
But we're doing it from a much more, I think, compassionate way, in a sense of like understanding where we are now, why, what happened to us, to our body, that we're here. And we have tangible solutions that if you put in the work, it's going to get better.
Well,
So
and
that's
I
the
think-
big difference for me.
I think the good results too are explained by what they don't have that you do have in something like MA, which is the concept of different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's like a shotgun, and it's like it's hitting the ones that are fitting that kind of description that
Right.
works for what Alexander was talking about and what his students.
Every
talk
human
about.
body is different. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, that's the whole thing. But you also have to keep in mind too that Alexander technique is like old, like it's like 100 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, at its time it was revolutionary. It's just like we've come a long way in 100 years. Like things have changed. Like
Yeah.
like the stuff that I'm teaching is based upon like really advanced biomechanics and therapy that is current. Like, so there's that too. I mean, and things evolve. Like it'll continue to change some, but I just, yeah, that's the whole thing. I guess that's the main thing that is important, is that it's actionable for you. Like you can do it for you. You don't need another human to like do something to you. It's like, you can do it at home, and it's, you can do it in a warm up. It's like simple. I think that when you're talking about eliminating barriers to entry, that's the main thing, is just making it like simple for you. I mean, I can literally pick it up off an Instagram post and implement it immediately, and that's what I want you to be able to do. I don't want you to become addicted to me, because that would end very quickly. I want you to use this stuff and just be awesome, and make it work. But anyway,
Hey, Chris,
I gotta go. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
me too, guys.
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
Sorry.
good discussion to have. I'll post a recording. Good talk, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.